looks at how when you go to a certain place, you also don't interfere with the socio-cultural fabric of the local communities there. I think a person who is immersed in nature, trying to share her note, try and make peace with the fact that you can't do everything, but you do what you can.
Adithi Muralidhar, a nature enthusiast based in Mumbai, India, is our guest for the day. She's had the habit of penning down her observations on nature, environment, and culture. She'll be sharing her experiences and observations on nature, wildlife, travel, environmental education, sustainability, socio-economic, and cultural aspects of the environment. Welcome, Adithi, to Oli Green.
Thank you so much, Abby. Thank you for your kind invitation.
Okay, to begin with, how did you develop this intense love for nature and also the habit of penning down your thoughts on different aspects of the domain of environment?
So I think as long as I can remember, I've always been interested in nature. I grew up in this very green pocket in Mumbai, though it's the very polluted and very crowded city and chaotic. I think I always had this green space around me, and that sort of initiated this love for nature that I had. And I was part of a nature club, or even if we just used to walk anywhere, my mom would show me some birds. So I think this connection with nature was pretty much right from childhood, I think. And I think it has grown into something more beautiful at this stage, where I think it's more than just a passion for nature, but there is some other deeper connection, I think, right now.
Great. Okay. So now, being out in the field and wilderness for a long time, can you share your views on the habitat and wildlife diversity of India?
Yeah, sure. So one thing that's really exciting about India is that it is so diverse in terms of geography, culture, and so many other, parameters. And if one just travels even a few couple of 100 kilometers from your city, you'll find there's so much difference. Like the language dialect will also change. So that way, India is a great place to explore a lot of habitats. Maybe to give you some shots of what I mean about this diversity, I thought I'll just share a couple of pictures. So if we just take a glimpse of the different habitats. So if we go up north, we actually have these very high altitude mountains. So the photo you see here is from Sikkim, and it actually shows Kanchenjunga, which we know is a 8,000 plus mountain in our country. And we have these opportunities to see these extremely extreme climates over here. At the same time, we also have many famous passes all across the north. So this is part of a very famous trek called the Baba Pass in Himachal Pradesh. And we have stunning landscapes, and we sort of envy some photos when we see of, Europe and all of that. But we have all of that right here in our country. And you get to see very interesting biodiversity specific to that region. Like here you see a red-fronted rosefinch. And we also have deserts, but then we have hot deserts and cold deserts. So this is like a typical landscape of Ladakh, where absolutely you'll see no tree and no sort of greenery, but yet it's like teeming with life. Here you see the blue sheep, and you're seeing the Mongolian finch. Everything about it is so fascinating. We just saw the landscape is all a brown shade of pink, and all the wildlife also here are so blended, as part of that interesting habitat. And there's so much excitement to see what you might stumble upon. Sometimes you never know, you'll stumble upon a snow leopard or a wolf or something. And if you keep coming south, then suddenly you will find landscapes like this, at the foothills, like you have pine trees, gushing rivers where the glacier water is melting. And again, here, the kind of wildlife that one would see. And this scape, for example, is from winter in Uttarakhand. Again, rhododendron mixed forests. So even in terms of flora, or the kind of wildlife these places support, it's quite interesting. And we know that we have more than 1,000 species of birds in the country. And one would think that, we see birds like this only in paintings. But yes, we have birds like this in India that we can observe. Scarlet finches, which was always, I used to think was one of the most elusive and enigmatic birds if we try hard enough, we might come across these kind of lovely birds. And then the forests disappear, and in the middle of these high hills, suddenly you'll also find meadows. And these are great places to even see these flowers that you see, the yellow and purple that you see. So the kind of flora that one even observes in the Himalayas is quite beyond imagination. The colors, the forms, various orchids that you see in Northeast, it sort of really tests that what can imagine, what can be beyond imagination, kind of a thing. This cape is of course from Northeast India, Namdapha National Park in Arunachal. And of course, we also, as we keep coming down the hills, we'll also find plains where we are more familiar with grasslands. This is the famous Brahmaputra, the floodplains, where again you have a very different kind of biodiversity, the kind of birds that you find in such scapes, and even places where there's a lot of human habitation, where agricultural farming is happening. All of these places, we still have a lot of wildlife. Like, for example, it's very common that we are in the train and we see a roller or a beaver bird, an entire community of beaver birds nesting in one place. So there's no place, I think, here that's devoid of any biodiversity. And then we then come to scapes where there's a hot desert. I mean, we saw cold desert, now you have hot desert, you have cacti kind of families, and even here you'll find that you have wildlife that is actually being thriving in such places which we feel are so lifeless, but actually it's not. And as we keep coming south, I think more of us are maybe familiar that okay, there are these dry deciduous forests, because we also know that these kind of forests support tigers, and I think many central Indian tiger reserves are famous for the national parks, and people like to go safaris there. Rainforests, again, we have excellent rainforests in India. This is in Agumbe in Karnataka, often known as the second wettest place in India. And the density of trees here, they're so close together. If you walk in the forest here, it's absolutely dark. And the kind of wildlife you find here, again, is very different. So it's like these, like, for example, are some endemic species. It's the Malabar giant squirrel, Malabar trogon. On the right, I think, if I'm not mistaken, is an Andaman clipper. It's an endemic butterfly. So now we're coming to these really interesting tropical forest specialities like king cobra and draco, and all of this is found in our country. And then, not to forget, you have this entirely new habitat, mangroves, which line much of our coastline. And of course, we do have a huge patch of mangrove ecosystem in the east. This is from Odisha. And they again support a very unique biodiversity. You have saltwater crocodiles there, water monitors, different types of kingfishers that one might spot. So these are all from Vitarkanika, for example. So we've traversed through all kinds of landscapes here, and we also have our own islands. So this is, for example, from the Great Nicobar, which is so far out from mainland that I think it's probably more close to other countries than mainland India. And there we have these absolutely beautiful beaches, which we envy when we look at, maybe other countries, but we have our own stunning beaches like this. So, this is where this picture is taken from, and you can see how far out it is in the Indian Ocean. And the kind of marine life that is probably something that's an entirely different chapter. We don't even know what's down there, and a glimpse into the marine life will then, take you again to a whole different world. So, and I think there are also certain unique things about our habitats, like we have the Shola forests, which are these beautiful dense forests in the mountain, which are interspersed with these grasslands. And again, there you find that it supports a variety of wildlife, often endemic to that region. And lastly, we also have sometimes what is often perceived as wastelands or scrublands, but they also are unique habitats, thorn forests, scrublands, where we find a lot of wildlife, which maybe we take for granted because it's we don't actually go to these places. Like, we go to a forest to see animals, but you won't often find that someone will go to a thorn forest or, something that doesn't look like a forest to see animals. But that's actually quite the opposite. One can see a lot of things even in salt pan areas like Kutch. Amazing wildlife. They're not barren at all. And you can find a lot of interesting species in all these places. So it's like you have this one country and you have so many different, habitats to see and wildlife to see. And there's so much more. I don't think I've even covered like half of it. So, but that's just an idea to say that that's how diverse our geography is, and also the biodiversity that comes with it.
That was a wonderful trip across India. I mean, showing the colorful India as such, with the rich biodiversity. I mean, now moving on to another topic, which is your favorite, sustainable travel, a practice that you've been, because we've been traveling all around the place. I mean, from the presentation itself, we can see that. I mean, a practice that you try to follow is sustainable travel. Can you throw some light on this particular topic? What is sustainable travel?
Um, this is something that kept affecting me over time. Like, as and when you keep going to different places, you started noticing these things. So of course, travel comes in all forms, right? So we commute to work sometimes, or it's like we have a vacation, school vacation, we take some time off, go to our hometown. But I think a lot of us now are also into traveling for a sense of recreation, to connect with nature, culture, seeking adventure, and all sorts. But time and again, sometimes something like this you come across. And so this is a hill station very close to Mumbai city, Lonavala. And it was a beautiful monsoon morning, and we were trekking up this hill. And this was a landscape that I saw. And it was really nice. It was cold, it was breezy. And then I saw these white specks at the bottom of the hill. And because I had my binocs with me, what I found out were these are thermocol plates. And it sort of like really shook me, and this is not just one place. I sort of kept seeing this again and again. And it made me question that what is it that we are doing as tourists, right? I mean, there has to be some sense of responsibility that we need to be having when it comes to us trying to go to a place. I mean, we go to these places because it's beautiful, because we can connect with nature, but then how can we leave a place like this? So it did get me thinking about what more can we do to keep our travel eco-friendly and sustainable, though sometimes this term is like sort of an oxymoron, because tourism or traveling does mean that you'll have a carbon footprint. It's not, you cannot have traveling without carbon footprint, but at the same time you want it to be sustainable. But it's, I think, more about trying to find that balance. And I tried to get to know more about what this means. And sustainable travel is in some sense not just looking at environment, but also it looks at how when you go to a certain place, you also don't interfere with the socio-cultural fabric of the local communities there. In fact, apart from the fact that it shouldn't affect them negatively, we should also look to how it can affect them positively. And I try to keep myself informed about it, and how does a regular citizen start to become a sustainable traveler? And of course, like, the obvious things are trying to use more public transport and so on. But there were also these very small things that one could do. Like, of course, we don't litter maybe, but you also need to ask yourself that even if I've been given a space to throw trash, should you be throwing trash there? I'd like to point this example out. This is Shirui Hills in Manipur. It's absolutely gorgeous, and there's this rare lily that comes up here during a specific time of the year, and the whole mountain is filled with lilies. So it's very famous for that. We had gone off season, and this is how the landscape looked, and the whole path was lined with these dustbins. Now, I did sort of think that, okay, they have provided dustbins, which is great. So people who are walking can throw their trash there. But we need to also ask ourselves that how often are these emptied? What if the wind knocks it over? Where does it go from here? I mean, these are such remote locations, so beautiful. You can't help but ask yourself that question. So I've sort of also started practicing where you completely bring back all the trash with you and dispose it off in the nearest town, urban town. Because even if you have places to dispose your trash somewhere, it might be a little doubtful on where does it go from there. Similarly, some things that if small groups are going together somewhere, there are possibilities of having cleanups. You go up the hill, while you're coming down, you can clean up the place. It's your little contribution. You actually leave a place cleaner than before, which is some form of contribution. So in terms of waste generation, when you for when you one travels, I think one needs to look at these kind of things, that how can we ensure that we avoid purchasing bottled water, what are possible alternatives. So I've written like notes about all of these on my blog, Earthly Notes, and they're actually more of personal experiences with goof ups also. Many times you plan something and it doesn't work, which is fine, which is how it is. But I think the starting point is that when you go to a remote place, you need to just keep asking yourself, where is your trash going? Because it might not be as simple as it looks. I mean, and I'll just leave you with this picture also, where this is a roadside dhaba. The food was great, but this is what is usually there behind every shop in most tourist areas. So those are some things that I feel are possible for sustainable travel. And there are other important things as well, as learning to respect the flora and fauna in the place you go. If you go for trekking in remote areas, we should be following hygienic camping protocols. No one likes to talk about all this because they're like, oh, it's a personal thing. Oh, where do we go? We're in the hills. You have to go out in the open. But then I think these are things that need to be brought into the conversation, because if we want to promote these kinds or these forms of tourism, then these kind of things have to be known to tourists as well. The other thing is this thing of going off-roading. It might seem like it's very cool. You have a good car and you can just off-road into these locations, but there are also high possibilities that you might mess with microhabitats. Like here, you see this absolutely camouflaged nest of an ashy-crowned sparrowlark in a Ladakh landscape. It's very unlikely that we are going to spot this. And if we just are driving around off the path, we don't know what kind of microhabitats we'll be messing with. Similarly, a lot of us now like to go to safaris, and there is this very strange demand that we want to see only the tigers and the lions. But we have to be mindful of the fact that these can actually lead to unethical practices, and and it's not the fault of the locals who have their income dependent on us tourists. So as a tourist, we should also be mindful of the kind of demands we are placing on locals. So that's also another thing I think we need to be careful of. And at the end of the day, we have to remember that, trash always finds its way to wildlife. Anywhere, it will find its way. And there are like so many examples out there. I think landscapes like this are so common. A beach is the best place to see what kind of things one can find, from medical waste to everything under the sun you find on a beach, and you'll find these plovers foraging there. And it's kind of really worrisome to see, what that might be. And another thing that has sort of been catching my attention is how photography is picking up in the tourism sector. And we have to also be careful about ethical wildlife photography. Like here, we see a pair of frogmouths who depend on their very cryptic coloration to be, absolutely camouflaged inside a foliage. But as there's a demand of wanting to get a good picture, we do find that sometimes we mess around with the habitat, thereby actually exposing them and increasing the risk that, of their maybe reproductive biology or any sort of even survival for that matter. So these are things that I think we should be mindful of as tourists, because the demand comes from us, right? The tourists. So that way. And the last part of sustainable travel, which I think is important, is as I mentioned, that it's not just environment, but it's also the social cultural fabric of any place that we go to. And therefore, I think it's important that we are also supporting and respecting the local people, their culture, their traditions. We don't even know what are the ways in which actually we affect them. One of the classic examples that I often give is that in Ladakh, we have the system of dry toilet. and it works for them because the place is having it's a place where there's water scarcity. It's a cold desert, but then, and they have this form where you uh, have this toilet and you put agricultural waste on it, and then they close the toilet for a period of 3-4 months, and it becomes manure for their fields. So there's a system in place, and it works for that ecology. But now with this influx of tourists who want water-based toilets, you're sort of not just eroding this practice, but it's actually causing ecological damage also. Because in a place where temperatures go to minus 30, 40 degrees, if you have plumbing and piping, these pipes break they crack, and they get spoiled every year. And the onus of repairing them, taking care of them, the expense, everything is on the local people. So we often don't even understand that tourists can have such impact on local practices. And also, it might be a good idea also that we start supporting homestays where we get to stay with the locals. We learn about their culture. We get to see how they keep their house, know more about their family. And we have this habit of taking souvenirs for our friends and colleagues, and we could invest in something that is directly made by the people of the area instead of having these keychains and all of that. So we have to look at ways in which we can support the local community. And one very important thing is people often think that if we go north, we go trekking, there has to be Maggie or something like that. I mean, what's the fun of going and having Maggie when you're sitting in a beautiful mountain in the Himalayas, right? And we should have the thrill of tasting what is the local food there, what's grown there locally. We might not like it or something, but if we don't try, we don't know. And there's excitement in trying these new things. And I think it brings us closer to people, it helps us appreciate differences. So, I mean, overall, I do feel that all of these are also part of sustainable travel. And of course, this is not like some sort of a thing that, do 1, 2, 3 and you're a sustainable traveler. It doesn't work like that. We are all different. We have different constraints, limitations, both in terms of freedom or financial freedom and all of that. So we need to just take a call to see what works for us and try and do what we can within our limits. So it's not like these are the rules and this is how it is. So I think with each trip, I continuously am learning myself, and I keep making mistakes and I keep learning. So this is sort of a summary of what I have understood about sustainable travel.
Really, very well explained. I mean, what is sustainable travel, how you have perceived it, being mindful about showing respect to the nature, understand the importance of coexistence, respect the local community, try and understand their cuisine, their produce, buy whatever is possible from them as souvenirs. Really, really, very well explained. Thanks a lot for that. I mean, now moving on, in the presentation that you've shown, we have seen a lot of birds. We understand that you're also a very passionate birder. More than a bird photographer, you're a birder, understanding the birds. Can you tell us in brief about your experiences as a birder and your advice to, because, I mean, as you said rightly, there are a lot of people, if you see in the social media today, there are a lot of youngsters who come into the field of birding and bird photography. Your advice to them as to how to follow this passion. You mentioned very briefly about ethical bird photography, but then if there is an advice, what will be that?
I mean, I'm maybe a little more. I have a soft corner for birds, maybe, compared to other forms of nature. But in general, I enjoy watching everything in nature, be it an insect or a butterfly, reptiles, everything. But there's something about birds that is exciting. And if there's something I feel I would want to share with others, is that we are living in a time where, we're always constantly sharing something. We have our phone in our hand, and or we're interested in photography. And there are all these other distractions around nature observation, right? So, for example, oh, how many birds did you see? I checked this off my list, this. And often I feel this can be a distraction from the main essence of, having that connect with nature. So while there's okay to have a little healthy competition around how many species you have seen or which all places have you explored. We must, I think, also take time to just build that sense of being very patient when you're in nature, especially when you're observing birds, because you can even spend 2 hours trying to wait for a bird to come or, get a glimpse of something that it's doing in its natural habitat. And these kind of skills are, I think, very important for someone to have, that kind of patience, perseverance, and that sense that uh, things come with after putting in effort. The kind of uh, pleasure you get in observing nature in that sense, I think, is far more rewarding. And it humbles you as a person because it sort of then makes you feel very little in the big scheme of things. So I feel that in all this chaos and distractions, that part gets left off. So for people who are initiating into anything that is into nature watching, I would say that keep that bit alive.
Okay, your blog and your website, I mean your YouTube channel, the name is Earthly Notes, right?
Yeah.
What is those earthly notes? I mean, how did you reach that term? And can you give a brief on what your YouTube channel also is all about?
So, like you had mentioned, I've always had this habit of writing down, and we have moved to this digital age where, in a click of a button, you have access to so much information. And I did notice as I interacted with people that people were generally very interested to know a lot of things about nature. So I started this blog with that intention that I want all this information out there for people who are interested, who want to know something better, and talking about things that probably are not there in the major discourse, like, how tough it is to look for a bird, or, what are the failures associated with not finding something, or the thrill of hearing something in the forest but not seeing it. So all these other things. So it started out that way, and earthly notes was something like, so we're it's like I'm an earthling, right? So, and I have these, nature is my muse, so that's why it's like earthly notes, musings of a earthling. It's, I think, a person who is immersed in nature trying to share her notes. It sort of just, I think, came from there. And of course, because I'm from Earth, I sort of gave the name that way. And I have been putting a lot of things, resources also for people, not just blog posts on wildlife or anything, but also things that can help people to build their interest in this field. So perhaps I can share the links with you later on. If someone wants to initiate bird watching, often enough you find difficulty in that bird just flew away. So what do I observe, right? So how do you guide new beginners who are into bird watching what to observe about the birds? We've developed guidelines on it, and something that helps you move in the direction that you want.
And about
Yeah.
your YouTube channel also, the same intention?
Yeah, mostly yes. So it's I don't have a very fancy camera. I just have a point and shoot camera, and because we have also been in the process of developing pedagogical resources around bird watching and all that, I thought it'll be a good place to have this repository of nature videos, because I'm sure teachers, students are always on the lookout of very basic things like even a preening crow, or and pigeons, everyday pigeons, or things like you experience in nature, and now you have the power to capture that with your camera. So I wanted the YouTube channel also just to be a space where experiences around nature are documented. So yeah.
Okay, the link to Adithi's Instagram handle, the YouTube channel, and the blog post will be given in the description. We can check it out there. I mean, one last question. I mean, in our channel, we talk about in Only Green being all about making our world a greener place for our future generations. From your experience, your travel, your watching the birds, watching the nature, watching different biodiversity and around you, can you share your message to our viewers as to how we can all, as individuals, contribute towards making this world a greener place?
So I think this is a question that all of us who are interested in nature and environment, we keep asking this self to us. I think that initially have to make peace with the fact that no matter what we do as an individual, it's often that we might not see the impact of our actions so easily. I mean, the issue itself is so broad. So we need to make peace with that, because often enough you feel that you're doing something personally, but then you feel that you're not making a difference. And I think this is a very common feeling to have, especially when you are very keen to do something for nature and environment. Having peace, made peace with that, I think it's the most important thing is trying to find what is your comfort zone and what is it you can do within the limitations you have. Like I said, everybody is different. Um, just merely saying things like, oh, we should all have organic food doesn't make sense in today's world, because there's also these issues of affordability, access, so many other things. So it, I think, comes down to trying to do what you can do best in your context. If you're able to segregate waste and compost your waste, great. It might seem unconnected to the whole idea of wildlife being protected, but it's all linked. So that's another thing we need to sort of figure out. Similarly, if you think that, I will absolutely not purchase a car and I use only public transport, if that works for you, if it's possible within your context, you can explore that. So there is, again, no step 1, 2, 3 for this. I think everyone have to figure out their balance, and try and make peace with the fact that you can't do everything, but you do what you can. So that is the general principle that even I try to follow.
Thanks, Adithi. It's been great talking to you. Your observations, your thoughts, and I'm very sure it will be instrumental in creating an awareness, instrumental in making people being very conscious about what they do towards our nature and make this world a greener place for our future generations. Wishing you all the very best in all your future endeavors.
Thank you so much. It was very nice being part of it.